This man is the commander of a Navy SEAL team, and his name is James Reese. That day, James received orders from his superiors. He was to lead 13 SEALs into Syria to capture a chemist, Dr. Kahani, in order to stop a potential chemical weapon leak. James had been through countless battles, so this mission seemed almost routine, but no one could have imagined that what looked like a simple op would become the start of his worst nightmare. After carefully planning the operation, James led his team into action that night, but as soon as they moved in on the target, they were ambushed. The enemy seemed to know their plan in advance and had set up multiple traps along their route. Surrounded and outgunned, James's team suffered devastating casualties. Backup finally arrived and pulled James and the few remaining survivors back to safety. It wasn't until he was aboard the evacuation helicopter that James realized nearly his entire team was dead. After recovering the bodies of his men, James was taken in for debriefing. His commanding officer asked him to explain what happened. James told the story as he remembered it, until they played back the mission audio. James froze. The voice on the recording wasn't his. Someone had tampered with the evidence. James was forced to undergo medical tests. His superiors suspected he might have suffered a head injury in combat, causing memory lapses, but all scans came back normal. The doctor simply told him to go home, rest, avoid alcohol, and come back if any memories resurfaced. That evening, James and Boozer, the only surviving teammate, met at a bar to drink in honor of their fallen brothers. While they were drinking, a female reporter approached James. Without hesitation, she tried to press him for details about the mission. James stayed silent, poured her the rest of his drink, and walked away. Soon after, he returned home from the front lines. At the airport, his close friend Ben Edwards was there to pick him up. On the drive, James told Ben about the strange inconsistencies in the mission. Ben offered a few words of comfort, and soon James was back home safe. He thought he could finally relax and spend some quiet time with his family, but instead, he would end up bringing them a nightmare. The next morning, James received a phone call that changed his life forever. After hanging up, he rushed to Boozer's house. There, federal agents told him Boozer had taken his own life. That's impossible. He was fine yesterday. How could he have shot himself? Yesterday, yes, we were together. He was perfectly fine. The agent replied, according to the coroner, he died the night before last. There's no way you saw him last night. James was stunned. Later, he met up with Ben and invited him out on a boat, hoping to clear his mind. Out at sea, James shared his growing doubts and pulled out Boozer's personal item, a 9mm pistol. But James knew Boozer had always preferred a .45 Colt 1911. If Boozer had truly wanted to end his life, he would never have chosen a 9mm. It didn't add up. James kept these suspicions to himself and attended his teammate's funeral. Afterward, on his way home, he noticed a car tailing him. Once home, he told his wife to take their daughter inside while he quietly circled around, ready to confront the threat. To his surprise, the person in the car was the same reporter from the bar. James invited her into the garage. Katie, the reporter, thought he was agreeing to an interview. Instead, James asked if she remembered the man who had been sitting next to him that night. Her answer shook him to the core. She told him there had been no one else with him at that bar. She handed James the autopsy report on Boozer, which confirmed that Boozer had died before the night James thought they were drinking together. Before she could say more, James ordered her to leave. She left her business card and walked out. James stared at the report, his mind spinning. One moment he clearly remembered drinking with Boozer. The next, the seat beside him was empty. He locked Boozer's pistol in a safe, went upstairs, and told his wife he needed to get checked at the hospital. Maybe something really was wrong with his head. But he didn't know that would be the last conversation he'd ever have with her. James went to the hospital. As he lay in the MRI machine, images of the ambush and his fallen brothers flooded back. Time blurred until the scan ended. As he stepped out, a masked gunman pointed a weapon at him. James slowly raised his hands and sat up. Another gunman appeared, pressing a pistol to his head. James stayed calm. In a sudden move, he grabbed one gun, kicked the second assailant in the groin, and fired, dropping one attacker. But the other wasn't finished. He kicked James's weapon away. Furious, James gouged the man's eye, then delivered a crushing blow to his groin, dropping him to the floor. James pummeled him with punches, but the man fought back, slashing James across the chest with a knife. James wrapped a hospital gown around his arm to block further strikes. As they struggled, the first gunman, who had only been wounded, returned to help. Together they tried to drive the knife into James's throat, but James, stubborn and relentless, refused to yield. He twisted one attacker's arm, forcing him to stab himself, then slammed him down and bit into his wrist. The man screamed and dropped his weapon. James seized the pistol and fired 5 rapid shots, killing him. The other man, bleeding from his own wound, turned to flee. James fired another round and gave chase, but the attacker escaped into the distance. James instinctively checked the pistol and froze. It was the very same gun he had locked in his safe the night before. At that moment, James suddenly sensed something was wrong. While making a frantic phone call, he sped home as fast as he could. He arrived quickly and entered cautiously. The silence in the house was unnerving. Then, in the kitchen, James found his wife and daughter, both shot dead. His heart shattered instantly, a grief beyond words. All he could do was scream in agony. Who could be so cruel, to kill women and children? What was it all for? No one could be more wretched than James. In just 2 days, he had attended the funerals of 15 people, including his own wife and daughter. Burying his sorrow deep inside, James laid his family to rest. He swore that no matter who was behind this, they would pay in blood. After the funeral, he sat for hours at their graves, unable to leave. That night, he wandered the house in a daze, sitting alone in the kitchen or staring at a crayon drawing of their family on his daughter's bedroom wall, lost in memories. It was unimaginable, one happy family destroyed overnight. At dawn, NCIS agents knocked on James's door. When he saw the lead agent, James suddenly remembered, this was the same man who handled Boozer's case. The agent got straight to the point. He wanted to inspect James's gun safe. James let him in and opened it. After examining it, the agent asked, "Who knows the combination to this safe?" "Only my fingerprint can open it, so no one else could have accessed the weapons. Unless they used some high-tech method to steal them." The agent began to press further, but James snapped. He pointed at the agent and yelled, accusing NCIS of being useless, wasting time harassing a victim instead of hunting the killers. He insisted again that Boozer's death was no accident. The agent didn't argue. He calmly reassured James and left. Later, Katie and the same agent went to the hospital to check the scene. The agent told Katie that he had been the first to arrive after the incident. But aside from a few shell casings fired by James, there were no traces of the attackers, no bodies, no blood. There were no security cameras in the area, either, no way to know what really happened. The agent theorized, maybe James really fought off attackers, but the scene had been cleaned before police arrived, or maybe nothing happened at all, and it was all in James's head. Whatever the reason, James had clearly gone to the hospital for a reason, and from his demeanor, the agent believed James was telling the truth. What they needed now was evidence. That night, James sat silently in his house, deep in thought. Suddenly, he heard a noise at the door. He raised his gun, crept toward the sound, and opened the door a crack. It was Katie. At first, James told her he had nothing to say. But then she said something that made him pause. After sitting down, Katie explained that the NCIS agent had been first on the scene, yet he reported no sign of attackers. James told her many professional groups are capable of erasing a crime scene in minutes. Katie then handed him a police file on Boozer's case. As James flipped through it, he saw that the same agent had also been the first to arrive at Boozer's scene. James immediately sensed something was off. After Katie left, he began digging into the agent's background online. At first, it was just to pass the time, but then he made a shocking discovery. Zooming in on a photo of the agent, James covered parts of the image with his fingers, and realized the man's eyes were identical to those of the masked attacker at the hospital. He started connecting the dots. In both Boozer's death and his family's murder, James's first call had been to the police. By protocol, the first responder should have been local police, not an NCIS agent. The agent was hiding something. James decided to tail him. He gathered his best gear and began photographing the agent's daily routines, studying his habits. Then he handed the data over to Ben, asking him, as a CIA operative, to dig deeper. Ben didn't hesitate. James didn't rest. While the agent was at work, he slipped into his apartment. After making sure it was safe, he plugged a hard drive into the agent's computer and copied all the data. When finished, he placed everything back exactly as it was and slipped out unnoticed. That night, James waited anxiously. Ben arrived at his door. The moment he stepped in, Ben shared his discovery. 2 days before James's family was killed, the agent had pulled James's personal records from a database. The agent was very likely the culprit. Ben then handed James a package. Inside was one of John Wick's favorite pistols, Ben's way of helping James get revenge for his family and fallen brothers. Late that night, James became a shadow in the dark. He scaled walls and rooftops, slipping into the agent's apartment without a sound. He approached the bed, first pocketing the gun under the agent's pillow, then shoving a thick suppressor into the agent's mouth. He ordered the agent to show his hands. After checking and finding no wounds, James knew he wasn't the masked man, but he certainly knew something. Under interrogation, the agent gave up a name, Saul Agnon. The agent said only that money had been wired to his account and he was following orders. James froze for a split second. The agent seized the moment to fight back, but James immediately put a bullet in him. The agent died on the spot. James staged the scene to look like an accident and vanished into the night. Next on the list was Saul. With the name in hand, James searched online and found another lead, Capstone Industries. He vowed to strike back. Everyone involved would be marked for death. First, he gathered all his weapons, passports, cash, handguns, an M4, even a sniper rifle. He packed everything into his vehicle, turning it into a mobile armory. Then, he set up a meeting with Katie. The two met at a crowded restaurant. As soon as they sat down, James urgently asked the reporter if she had ever heard of Saul or Industries. Katie watched James speak so frantically he was practically spitting, but she stayed in her seat. Then she pulled James's medical report from her bag. James stared at the results in shock. The scan showed a tumor in his brain. His head spun. Katie told him he was sick, that everything he'd been experiencing was just hallucinations, and that maybe he was the one who had caused all this. But at that moment, James noticed a suspicious man nearby. He abruptly cut Katie off and told her to come with him. Katie was now convinced James was ill, but for the sake of the investigation, she followed him outside. As they ran, James told her they might be under surveillance. Katie was skeptical, but as soon as they got in the car, James saw in the rear-view mirror that the suspicious man had also started his engine. James slammed the accelerator. The cars collided with a violent crash. He told Katie to stay still, then opened the door to step out. Just as he set foot on the ground, a bullet whizzed past from behind. James didn't make mistakes. He dropped the man with a single shot. After confirming the man was dead, James searched his car and found a stack of documents. Back in his own car, he handed the file to Katie. When she saw a dossier on James himself, she realized everyone had been wrong about him. James looked at her and asked, "Do you still think I'm losing my mind?" They quickly withdrew to a nearby parking lot. After switching vehicles, James handed Katie a pistol for protection. Before they parted, Katie asked for more details about Capstone Industries and promised she would help investigate. Then they went their separate ways. In a remote safe house, James met with Ben. He handed over the documents on Saul and waited for good news. Ben appeared at a golf course where Saul was playing. After weeks of surveillance, he finally tracked him down. Late at night, Saul returned from a party and began his nightly routine. While brushing his teeth, he heard music playing in his bedroom. Cautiously, he stepped into the room. Suddenly, a large figure loomed behind him. James slipped a plastic bag over Saul's head and bound him with rope. Saul quickly passed out from lack of air. When he came to, he found himself naked and tied to a chair, with James standing over him. Facing this wealthy man, James didn't even need to use his fists. Just a few chilling words were enough to make Saul wet himself in terror. Finally, Saul gave up a name, Stephen Horn. He admitted he was only a pawn, following orders. It was all tied to a project called Road 4895, though he didn't know the details. James then asked about the assassin who killed his family. Saul revealed that a middleman named Marcus had hired him. Marcus was a second-tier human trafficker based in Mexico. James's kill list had just grown longer. James injected something into Saul's arm. Before leaving, he staged the scene to look like a drug overdose. The truth was beginning to take shape. James kept moving forward, never stopping. Before heading to Mexico, he met Ben on a mountaintop. He unfolded the list and told him, "Find Stephen Horn, and we'll uncover the truth behind my wife and daughter's deaths. Find Marcus, and we'll find the killer, blood for blood." A billionaire's morning routine. The first thing he did each day was check his stock prices. Before heading to work, he'd snap a photo of his mansion, post it online, and like his own post, then drive his supercar to the office. But he didn't know that death had been watching him all morning. James had been waiting on the road the billionaire traveled every day. A few hundred meters away, a single bullet found its mark. The billionaire slumped over, his car veered off, and it plunged down a cliff. James approached the wreck, retrieving a secured phone from the man's pocket. Using the man's face to unlock it, he cracked the data. It turned out the wealthy man was none other than Marcus, the second-tier trafficker. With the data in hand, James immediately sent the information to Ben. Ben quickly identified the assassin. They arranged to meet on a mountaintop in Mexico. James's uncle helped him connect with a local security company. They discovered a nearby training ground for assassins. A few days earlier, 2 members had gone on a mission, but only one returned, his arm still wounded. It was almost certain this man was the killer. The team of professionals discussed their plan. The security group suggested an ambush 200 meters from the compound to hit the target as they exited, a clean, safe kill. But James shook his head. No, one shot won't be enough. The visibility is excellent here. He was special forces. don't underestimate his tactics. This isn't about tactics, I need to see him up close and end it personally. Seeing James so determined, his friends wanted to stop him from acting on emotion, but remembering what he'd been through, they agreed to his plan. They would wipe out the entire assassin cell. As James moved in for the assault, a wave of weakness hit him, he collapsed. His uncle brought in a medical expert to check on him. The doctor said James's condition was serious. If the tumor was benign, treatment over 6 months could cure it. What if I don't get treated? Then you endure it. James only asked for medication to manage symptoms temporarily. That night, his friends urged him to get treatment. They promised they would avenge him. But James didn't care about his own life. I have nothing left, nothing. He took everything from me. Hearing that, they stopped trying to convince him and quietly left. Only an elderly aunt stayed behind to speak. You're family to us too. If you're still alive after tomorrow, don't come back. With that, she left, leaving James alone with his thoughts. Soon, it was time. Rain poured down in sheets. A guard from the assassin compound dropped his vigilance and was strangled by James. That scene repeated again and again throughout the compound. James strangled until his arms ached, taking them down one by one. Outside, Ben and James flanked 4 more assassins from behind. Ben then activated a guard's radio to draw the enemy's attention. James signaled his teammate stationed above to provide cover fire. Immediately, the teammate fired, dropping one of the enemies. While he drew their fire, James slipped in from behind and struck. After a fierce fight, James killed every man in front of him. They were well trained, highly professional, but James's team pushed through the building and quickly eliminated the rest. James raised his weapon as his teammate tossed a flashbang inside. Next, they split up methodically to different firing positions, fully suppressing the enemy. Against the special forces, this ragtag group of killers didn't stand a chance. From above, gunfire rained down. The assassins scattered like headless flies, falling one by one. Finally, James's team stormed into a room. Inside were dozens of children the killers had abducted, planning to groom them into a new army. But now, 2 gunmen were holding them hostage. James and Ben exchanged a glance, then fired simultaneously, killing both men. They pushed deeper and soon spotted a man with a bandaged arm. Under heavy fire, James pressed forward relentlessly. At that moment, Ben was hit. Fortunately, his body armor saved him. James advanced alone while Ben stayed put to recover. After a quick reload, Ben steadied himself and fired a round through a wall, killing the assassin who had just shot him. James continued forward, hunting his target. In one room, they were separated only by a wall. James spotted a bloody hand on the doorframe and looped around through the window. By the time the assassin noticed, it was too late. James shot him in the shoulder, then again, knocking him unconscious. James dragged him into the factory, hoisted him up, and pulled a battle axe from his back, then buried it in the man's gut. The assassin died in excruciating pain. Even after personally killing him, James felt no relief. His list was still unfinished. His path of vengeance was far from over. James prepared to leave Mexico. Before going, he left his father's beloved sniper rifle with his uncle as thanks. To keep others safe, he chose to travel alone, except for Liz, who flew him to San Francisco to hunt Steve. Who exactly was Steve? Why had he gone so far to destroy James? James arrived in San Francisco, ready for his next move. After some analysis, he learned that Capstone Industries' headquarters, Steve's domain, was guarded by elite security, so James decided to do the opposite. He would set up an ambush along Steve's daily route. No one would ever suspect James would strike in such a public place. James spent days tracking Steve's routine. By chance, he saw 2 FBI agents entering Capstone's building. That development would change everything. Agents Tony and Wilson were there investigating. They had discovered that the assassin James killed on the road earlier was one of Steve's men. Following the trail, they believed a confrontation between Steve and James was inevitable. To catch James, they requested access to Capstone's building. But Steve flatly refused. He trusted his security team completely. Meanwhile, Katie was also inside the building. Through her investigation, Katie uncovered that Steve's Capstone Industries had bought Mike's pharmaceutical company. That company had been researching a drug to treat PTSD in veterans. Steve had pushed the drug into human trials. He used James's SEAL team as test subjects. This was the same Road 4895 project mentioned earlier, but because the drug was incomplete, it caused abscesses in James and his men. To cover it up, they sent James's team on a mission designed to get them killed. From the start, the mission had been a setup, a way to silence them, but the plan failed. James survived. So they escalated. They sent someone to murder his wife and daughter. Even hospital doctors manipulated James with PTSD-inducing drugs to accelerate Project 4895. When Katie confronted Mike with her findings, he hesitated. Knowing she couldn't push further, she left her card and walked away. Outside Capstone's gates, James considered the tangled web of players and felt overwhelmed. He returned to his safe house to rethink his strategy. By now, James's symptoms were worsening. His right hand trembled uncontrollably. He had no choice but to increase his dosage and shorten the intervals. Mike sat in his office, wrestling with his conscience. At last, he decided to tell Katie everything. He loaded all related data onto a USB drive. Katie soon got a call from Mike. He told her they had to meet that night and bring everything into the light. At the same time, Steve's subordinates noticed Mike's strange behavior. Steve sent men to kill him. Meanwhile, James was watching the building's entrance and spotted Steve leaving. He immediately sensed something off. Steve's bodyguards never split up, yet today they had divided. After confirming with Liz, James chose to follow the second group. Not long after, Mike met Katie at a subway station. Mike told her everything. Most importantly, 2 months ago, the company's ownership structure changed drastically, tied directly to RD4895. When he finished, he pulled out the USB containing crucial data. At that moment, Katie noticed a suspicious man nearby. She grabbed Mike and ran for the emergency exit. But they were one step too late. Mike was shot in the head from behind. Katie didn't look back, she just kept running. The assassin was about to catch up to the reporter, but she pulled out the pistol James had given her and shot him dead. She was shaken to the core, but knowing she wasn't truly safe, she forced herself to keep moving and climbed out of the subway. As soon as she reached the street, she saw a man approaching, drawing a gun from inside his coat. Frozen in terror, she couldn't move. At that critical instant, the man's head snapped back from a bullet. He dropped dead. James had arrived just in time, saving her life. He hustled her into a quiet alley and asked why Steve wanted her dead. Katie poured out everything she knew. James listened, expressionless, only interested in who was involved. Katie told him that 2 months ago, Steve had pulled $100 million from company stock to set up a web of shell companies. James immediately grasped the implication. Those shares were the blood price for his fallen teammates. If he tracked the shareholders, he'd find the conspirators. He pulled out his kill list and demanded Katie write down every name she knew. She tried to calm him, promising to expose them herself instead of letting him keep killing. But James had lost patience. He stared into her eyes, knowing she was holding back. He reached into her bag, took the USB drive, slipped it into his pocket, and handed the bag back. James told her flatly, he would not allow the killers of his family to face mere legal justice. There's a lot more fun waiting for them, he said, then drove off. On the road, James called Ben, asking him to run the names on the USB, everyone profiting from Project Road 4895. Ben knew this was bigger than anything they'd handled. He tried to dissuade James, but James cut him off. Can you do it or not? Ben sighed, I can. By morning, Ben reported back. Everyone James had already punished was on the list, and the remaining names could change everything. Too many powerful people were involved. James wasn't surprised. Just send me the names, he said. After the call, James slumped. They were all high-ranking SEAL officials. It was absurd, but even with everything on the line, he refused to back down. Fury flared. He'd start with Steve, just to get some payback. He asked Liz to buy him chemicals. He would build his own bomb. Because civilians were everywhere in the area, they planned carefully. James shut himself in his safe house, working without rest to make the explosive. The day arrived. FBI agent Tony and Katie were stationed at Capstone. Steve emerged from the building, walking toward his car through a crowd of reporters. At the same time, Liz blocked off the intersection with her car, creating a safe perimeter for bystanders. When Tony noticed Liz's vehicle, he sensed something off and led his men to intercept her, only to walk right into a trap. Everything was in place. James was about to detonate the bomb when he spotted Katie in Steve's car. At that moment, Katie noticed James's car across the street and began backing away. Steve also realized something was wrong, but too late. James pressed the trigger. Steve's car exploded, blood and smoke everywhere. Bodyguards swarmed in. James pulled out an M4 and assembled it on the spot. He stepped out, a one-man army in the chaos. Every shot hit its mark. He weaved through vehicles, using them as cover. The FBI followed the sound of gunfire, pushing through the fleeing crowd. James kept firing, mowing down Steve's men. He shot Steve in the arm. Seeing James like the angel of death, Steve begged for mercy. James walked up and blew his head off. In that final instant, Steve might have regretted ever crossing him. Before leaving, James glanced at Katie sprawled on the ground. To keep her out of it, he didn't say a word. He contacted Liz, arranged a rendezvous, then stole a pickup truck and roared off. Moments later, police cars swarmed in pursuit. On the run, James called Liz, warning her to stay safe, while he led the police the other way. At a bend, a spike strip shredded his tires. He abandoned the truck, diving into the woods, using vehicles as cover while stripping off gear. The commander ordered her officers to unleash suppressive fire. When the barrage stopped, she advanced, but James was gone, leaving only blood on the ground. James was wounded. Searching his abandoned truck, they found his forgotten medication, the one thing keeping his condition in check. Meanwhile, James pushed deeper into the forest, blood dripping from his arm. He leaned against a tree, resting until patrols passed, then slipped into a ranger cabin. Inside, he found a landline connected to the police and a bottle of disinfectant. He gritted his teeth and cleaned his wound. Reaching for his meds, he realized he'd left them behind. His hand trembled uncontrollably, jeopardizing his next move. Desperate, he grabbed whatever might help, then checked the map for his next path. Elsewhere, Tony led K-9 units and officers up the mountain. Thunder cracked overhead, rain pouring, hampering the chase. James took shelter in a narrow canyon, racked by physical and mental pain. He pulled out the family drawing his daughter had made, stealing himself. Then, with a bloody finger, he crossed out the name Steve on his kill list, but there were still 3 more names, 3 senior SEAL officers. Perhaps only the memory of his murdered wife and child kept him standing this long. At dawn the next day, Tony deployed a special forces team, hoping they could help capture James. When he briefed them on the situation, the entire squad fell silent. Tony frowned. "What's wrong?" "Sir, with respect, I've served with him. That man is a legend. A bunch of guys like us, we're no match for him." That soldier was kept at base. Tony wanted only those willing to fire on James. They prepared meticulously for the mission, because even wounded, James was far from ordinary. The team boarded a helicopter and began scouring the mountain. James spotted them and deliberately activated his phone. His location pinged to their system. The unit moved deep into the forest and reached the signal point. They moved with discipline, covering each other, not realizing James was already beneath their noses. A soldier found James's phone at the base of a tree. As they crept closer to check, James pulled a pin. Smoke engulfed them. He burst from cover, tackled one of them, and ripped his supply pack away. While fleeing, James wired up batteries from the pack and tossed them into the woods. At headquarters, multiple heat signatures popped up on the screen. They had no choice but to investigate each one. When they reached one hotspot, they found nothing but the warmth of a battery. James gained height, climbing toward the summit, but the team was closing in. Through his scope, he aimed at Tony. His finger hovered on the trigger, then he let go. When they reached the summit, James was gone. A soldier spotted a single spent round on a rock. "What's this supposed to mean?" "It means, he could have killed you just now." James clung to a sheer rock face, climbing bare-handed. Halfway across, his right hand trembled uncontrollably. He slipped, nearly falling to his death. After a moment, he dragged himself up, checking for broken bones. None, thankfully. Night fell, rain poured. James used supplies taken from the squad to pitch a makeshift shelter, lit a flare, then heated a blade. He clenched his teeth and pressed the red-hot blade into his wound, cauterizing it. The pain was so intense, he blacked out. In his haze, he was back in the past, chatting with his wife over a bedside radio, but the voice on the other end shifted. It was Tony. Tony pleaded with him to surrender, to stop killing innocents. James answered coldly, "No innocent has died by my hand. When I finish my list, I'll stop." Then he cut the line. Morning came. The soldiers kept hunting. A drone swept the terrain. James climbed another peak, checked his map. Ahead lay a charred forest. An idea sparked in his mind. Spotting the drone overhead, he raised his weapon and fired twice, bringing it down. Tossing the empty gun aside, he pressed on. He reached the burnt-out summit, wired all his explosives together, buried them, and held the detonator. Suddenly, a squad encircled him. James gripped the trigger, hand trembling, and warned them back. Another squad appeared behind him. No escape. Visions of his wife, his daughter, his fallen brothers flashed before his eyes. He released the trigger. A thunderous explosion shook the mountain. Rocks and soil cascaded, triggering a landslide. James tumbled with the debris, crashing to the valley floor. Half dead, he clawed his way free. Ahead lay a river, his escape, until he saw a hand reaching from the rubble. He hesitated, then turned back, pulling Wilson free. Seeing she was barely alive, he looked once more toward the river, then chose to save her. Thanks to his efforts, Wilson breathed again. The soldiers stormed down, but James was gone. Only Wilson remained. Liz watched news of the landslide, hearing reports that James might be dead. her heart sank. Then a voice spoke behind her. It was James. He hadn't avenged his family yet. Death wouldn't take him so easily. He had slipped the net. Liz ferried him out to sea. After thanking her, James dove overboard. Scene shift. James emerged on a distant shore where Ben waited. Together, they began planning their final strike. Elsewhere, 3 high-ranking SEAL officers reeled at the news of James's escape. Howard panicked. "We need an exit plan. Let's get out of here." But General Pillar, the highest in rank, sneered. "I've got 5,000 sailors ready to kill him." Little did he know, James was already offshore, watching every move. He and Ben had their plan. Howard rushed home. That night, as he prepared to flee, Ben was already waiting at his door. Elsewhere, James tracked down another officer, a Black SEAL veteran, outside a bar. They fought viciously. The man's raw strength overpowered James, slamming him to the ground. But James's combat instincts kicked in. He locked the man's neck in a choke, wrenched his arm back, and injected a sedative. When the officer woke, he was tied to a 5-meter pole, pinned down into the water, unable to move. James punished him with the very methods the officer once used in training. The officer spat defiance, vowing never to talk. James held him under until he drowned. After making it ashore, Ben had Howard's family tied up. James promised, as long as Howard helped him with one thing, his wife and children would be spared. For his family's safety, Howard reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Katie was rushing to finish her exposé on James. She sent it to a friend, asking him to publish it online. He promised it would hit the trending list within an hour. But after a long wait with no news, Katie called. He said he never got her file. A bad feeling hit her. She hurried to pack, but it was too late. The Secretary of Defense appeared calmly before her. Katie finally realized just how deep and dangerous this conspiracy ran. Knowing she couldn't escape, she sent James the Secretary's name. Cut to nightfall. Howard met with General Pillar, glancing nervously at his watch. Howard handed over a phone. James's voice came through. Pillar scoffed. "What can you do to me, you piece of trash?" 2 bombs, that's all it would take. Howard unzipped his jacket, revealing a bomb vest. Pillar's bravado vanished. He pleaded for his life, confessing there was someone even higher up. Spare him, and he'd give the name. But James already knew the Secretary of Defense was involved. He called the detonator. A single blast killed them both. Now James's list had only one name left, his final target. After the secretary whisked Katie away, she retreated to her safe house. There, she hired a dozen elite mercenary teams to lure James in and kill him off the books. But she underestimated him. James and Ben stopped their boat near a lighthouse. Ben took up a sniper position. James infiltrated from the water. Ben blew up a patrol boat as a diversion, giving James cover to advance. What neither side knew, Tony's Special Forces unit also arrived to aid the secretary. They spotted Ben's sniper perch. James charged forward, dropping every guard in his path. Ben shot out all the lights. Pinned behind a tree, James signaled Ben, who promptly took out another enemy. Moving in, James switched to his sidearm, gunning down anyone reloading. He closed in on the safe house. Tony and his men landed and, under heavy fire, identified themselves. The 2 groups joined forces. James cleared the back entrance, killing with surgical precision. Inside, he tossed smoke grenades, storming room after room like a grim reaper. Only 1 guard remained. James forced him to open the final door, then executed him. Inside, Katie stepped in his way, pleading, "If you kill her, there's no going back." The secretary eyed a pistol in her drawer. Katie kept talking, trying to stop James. But Lorraine, the secretary, knew if she lived, she'd spend the rest of her life in prison. She picked up the pistol and ended it herself. The last name on James's list was gone. When reinforcements arrived, they found only the secretary's body and Katie alive. Outside, Tony had been waiting. He aimed his gun at James's back, ordering him to surrender. James slowly set his weapon down but kept strapping on his dive gear, ignoring Tony's threats. Before diving, he said only one thing: "She's dead." Tony understood. James was the real victim. He lowered his weapon and let him go. In the final scenes, Katie published the truth to the world. Just then, a message from James arrived. There was still one more name, one more puppet master behind it all. Katie hesitated, then sent him the name. Cut to a remote stretch of ocean. Ben returned to his boat after surfing. When he stepped below deck, James was waiting. The last name was Ben. James asked quietly, "Why? Was it for money?" Ben looked down, guilt written all over his face. He confessed. General Pillar told him James and his men had terminal brain tumors. Letting them rot in hospitals would be cruel. Better to die with honor in combat. So Ben fed false intel, sending James's team into a slaughter. He never spent a cent of the money and left the conspiracy after. In the end, James raised his gun to Ben's head, and then we cut to James alone on a boat, staring at a family drawing covered in names. He kissed the image of his wife and daughter, then let it drift into the sea. It seems, in the end, James spared Ben's life. Every other name on his list had a death scene, except Ben's. That's the full story of the Terminal List. How did you feel about this film? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate it? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, see you next time.